When you think about the U.S. Constitution, ideas like separation of powers or a government run by the people, have you ever wondered where they actually came from? They didn't just pop up out of nowhere in Philadelphia back in 1787. Nope, they're part of this deep historical blueprint, an intellectual DNA that goes back thousands of years. So today, let's trace that code all the way back to its source.
It really all starts with these three simple but totally revolutionary words. But where did this idea, this truly radical thought that a government belongs to its people and not the other way around, where did it even begin?
Well, if you really want to understand the American experiment, the answer isn't in Washington, D.C. today. To find the source code, you've got to go way back in time, to the ancient world, where three totally separate streams of thought eventually flowed together to create something brand new.
Our first stop on this journey? Ancient Greece. This is the place that gave the world the revolutionary concept of democracy itself, a government run not by kings, not by priests, but by its own citizens.
The second piece of the puzzle comes from ancient Rome. Now, the Romans, they were the engineers of government. They took that Greek ideal and built a practical structure around it, one that could work on a massive scale. They really perfected the model of a large republic.
And the third essential stream of thought? Well, that's the deep ethical foundation, the moral compass that comes from Judeo-Christian traditions. This is what gave principles like justice and individual worth their real, lasting power.
All right, so let's start in ancient Greece. This is where the world first saw this completely wild idea of a government led by its citizens actually take root and, work.
At the very heart of Greek life was something called the polis, the city-state. And yeah, if that sounds kind of familiar, it's because it should. You can almost think of it as an early version of our own state and local governments, a community with the power to make its own laws and handle its own business.
America's founders were looking directly at the Greek playbook. From Athens, they took the whole idea of a written constitution, a formal public plan for how government should actually work. They adopted the concept of legislative bodies, where citizens get to make the laws. And get this, that civic duty that we all have, serving on a jury, that's a direct line, a straight shot, right back to daily life in ancient Athens. Pretty amazing, right?
The great Athenian leader, Pericles, he just summed it up perfectly. He said their government was called a democracy for one simple reason, because it favors the many instead of the few. That right there, that was the revolutionary spark that would stay lit for centuries before it finally set the new world on fire.
But there was a catch, a big one. The Greek model was a direct democracy, where every single citizen voted on every single issue. And look, that's great for a small city-state, but try doing that with a huge, sprawling nation. It's just not possible. And that's exactly where the Romans step into the story, taking that democratic spark and engineering it for a whole new scale.
Rome's great contribution was the Republic. They figured out a practical, real-world system for governing a huge territory, and they did it through elected representatives and a common set of laws for everyone.
At the very heart of the Roman Republic was this game-changing concept, the rule of law. This was a huge deal. The idea that nobody, and I mean nobody, not the richest senator, not the most famous general, was above the law. They first wrote it down in their famous 12 tables, and that single principle, that the law applies to everyone equally, became the absolute bedrock of the U.S. Constitution.
So America's founders, well, they were practically obsessed with the Roman model. Republicanism, that system of governing through people you elect, that forms the very heart of the American system. But maybe the most brilliant innovation they borrowed was the separation of powers. See, the Romans were smart enough to divide their government into competing branches to stop any one person from getting too powerful. The founders saw the genius in that and used it as the direct blueprint for our own legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Okay, so we've got the democratic spirit from Greece and the republican structure from Rome. But a government isn't just a machine. It needs a moral compass. So where did the ethical ideas about justice and human rights come from? For that, we have to look to that third, powerful ancient influence.
At the very core of Judeo-Christian ethics is this profound belief in individual worth. This is the idea that every single person has inherent value and dignity, not because of their wealth or their power, but simply because they're human.
And you can literally hear that idea echoing right into the soul of America's founding documents. When Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, he was tapping directly into this ancient ethical principle,
that our worth is universal and innate.
This ethical tradition also gave America two other cornerstone legal ideas. First, personal responsibility, the idea that we are all accountable for our choices. And second, that this accountability has to live inside a system of justice that's built not just on raw power, but on a shared understanding of right and wrong.
So now let's put all of these pieces together. The Founding Fathers weren't just copying and pasting from history books. No way. They were thoughtful architects, studying these ancient blueprints and then carefully blending them into a completely new and unique design for a government.
This table lays that blueprint out perfectly. You can literally see the DNA. The Greek passion for democracy becomes the American principle of we the people. Rome's pragmatic separation of powers directly creates our three branches of government. The rule of law, reinforced by both Rome and Judeo-Christian thought, makes the Constitution supreme, and that core belief in individual worth is what animates the Declaration of Independence. It all connects.
So in the end, it comes down to these three pillars. America isn't just a democracy or just a republic. It's a hybrid. It's got a democratic soul from Greece, its structural bones from Rome, and an ethical heart from Judeo-Christian tradition. Three ancient sources forged into one new nation.
These ideas are so much more than just history. They are America's inheritance, a living blueprint passed down through the ages. And that leaves us with a final, crucial question to consider. How are we, the citizens of today, living up to this ancient and powerful legacy?